Apparently Ras Al Ghul is at war with an old woman that's also a sorceress, or I would just call her an old witch, and her clan called the Untitled, but as it turns out it's actually an old part of Ras Al Ghul's clan, but they didn't want to follow his ways, but the old ways, and their clan is where the prophecy of me came from, and they knew I was coming, so they sent the Yeti to fetch me. As it turns out in this universe they are not evil, but it's Ras Al Ghul that's evil, and Dukra and the All-Caste knew that all along, and they also knew that I would be born someday soon, and they have been waiting for me to see the ancient god in the Chamber of All so he can bestow his gifts upon me. And so I was brought to their temples and I was introduced to Dukra, and they said, oh, he finally arrives, so handsome. And then I saw one of the most beautiful Asian women I had ever seen in my life, and she has beautiful black eyes with red pupils, and I said, fascinating, I can sense your ki and it's incredibly strong. And she said, you know the way of the mystics, you know the true magic. And I went silent and I had a serious expression on my face, and I said, yes, but only Harley Quinn knows about that. And she said, you will have no trouble entering the Chamber of All then, because I can sense your powers and strength have no limits, so you will have no trouble getting across the path and pushing the doors. As for your lover Harley Quinn, she might not be able to do it so easily. And Harley Quinn said, I could try, and Dukra, of course, and you might succeed my dear, but you might want to allow your husband to fight the ancient god by himself so you don't get killed. And she said, okay, creepy lady. And then Dukra smiled and said, interesting, I like this one. And she led me to an ancient cave with two big doors at the end of the ancient path, and I said, wait Harley, surround your body in your ki energy and try to control it so much so that it could make you fly. And she said, I can do that. And I said, yes ma'am, if you surround your body you can fly and levitate with that power. And Dukra rolled her eyes and said, you didn't teach her that before she came here. And I said, I explained the basics, but I didn't have time to show her everything. I was kinda on a deadline to meet Ras Al Ghul, so I had to hurry with my busy schedule, I'm sure you all understand maybe. And then me and Harley Quinn easily crossed the path, and then we both pushed the doors open and we walked through the gateway, and they instantly closed behind us. And I said, no turning back now. And Harley Quinn said, this place is a little creepy. And she said, wow, look at all this treasure. And I said, Harley, be careful, don't touch anything, we don't know what this stuff does. And a little boy spoke and he said, I have been waiting for you, young god. And he said, I know what you are, I even felt your powers behind that gate, and you and your girlfriend can back the way you came. And I said, sure, I could do that, but before I do I'm going to tell everyone that you just didn't want to help me out because you are a dishonorable man and you care nothing about your clan because you're lazy. And he got up and said, you have got some nerve, boy, coming in here playing on my ego. And then I said, I'm also going to tell everyone that you're scared of Ras Al Ghul. And he said, I am getting tired of these insults, could you please just stop? I was already going to help you anyway after I fight you. And I said, do we really need to do this? I would just rather do anything but this. And he said, no, I always wanted to fight a genius like you. And then he got in his stance, and then I felt ki starting to power up inside, and then all of a sudden I said, Kaoken, and then my powers exploded over 10 trillion fold. And he said, remarkable, your powers just multiplied and it's still growing. And then I gestured, come on. And then he tried his best to strike me, but he couldn't beat me at all. And then I disabled his limbs with a pressure point strike, and he said, what the hell did you do to me, you bastard? And I said, oh, nothing, I just used a pressure point strike that I learned a long time ago. And I said, could you please help me now? And he said, fine, damn it, you can drink that water and you can gain complete immortality, and your girlfriend could make that choice too, or I can give you swords that can kill any type of immortal. And I said, I will take the swords that killed any immortal. And he gave me these two divine metal swords, and I asked, are these first divine metal swords? And he said, yes, how did you know? And I said, I don't know, luck guess. And he said, you little shit, give me back the use of my arms and legs. And then Harley Quinn said, oh, I want the water. And then she drank the water, and then she gained true immortality. And then I pressed the pressure point on the ancient god, and he seemed very angry, and he said, no, leave my cave please. And I said, oh, one more thing, is there any way I could have all the choices? And he said, no, you got what you wanted and needed, and those swords are yours.